am the division director of social gerontology at the National Aging Research Institute. Welcome to NARI's online seminars and aging program. I would like to begin today by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which each of us are meeting. And for me, that is the Wurundjeri Woi Wurrung people. I would also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands and borders across Australia, and I pay my respects to elders past and present, and to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, including members of the Stolen Generation. So first, just a little bit of housekeeping about Zoom. At the conclusion of the talk, we will have time for Q&A. And if you have any questions while the presentation is going on, you can submit them in the chat. And at the end of the session, you can also submit the questions in the chat, the tabs at the bottom of your screen. Otherwise, you're welcome to also put your video on or raise your hand, and you can ask the question directly of our speaker. Today's seminar is being recorded, as you know, and it will be uploaded to our website in a few days. So do keep that in mind if you turn on your video to ask a question, that your image is going to be recorded and is part of the session. So with that bit of housekeeping out of the way, just to introduce our speaker. And so today I'm really excited to be introducing our speaker, Dr. Andrian Liem. Dr. Liem is a research fellow at the Jeffrey Cheah School of Medicine and Health Sciences in the Public Health Cluster at Monash University in Malaysia. He's a visiting scholar at NARI, so we're excited to have him here with us. His research interests include clinical and health psychology, Indigenous and cultural psychology, global health, migrants and refugees, gender and sexuality, and interfaith dialogue. He is originally from Indonesia and earned his PhD in psychology from the University of Queensland. And prior to joining Monash University, Malaysia, he worked at the University of Macau in assisting in the development of a digital mental health app for overseas Filipino workers. And this particular project was sponsored by the World Health Organization. Today, Andrian will be presenting Exploring the Experiences of Indonesian Migrant Domestic Workers and Caring for an Older Adult in Asia. So welcome, Andrian, and over to you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Prof. Bianca, for the opportunity to present my fellowship at Monash, Malaysia. And without further ado, I only have like 35 minutes to share my project, and we will continue with the question and answer. So I will share my screen. Just, okay. So I will start from, okay. Right, as Prof. Bianca has mentioned, that I will share about my fellowship at Monash, Malaysia. So I'm working with migrant workers, especially the Indonesian migrant domestic workers. And this is the preliminary results, quantitative part that we have collected last year. Acknowledgement of country by respect to the elders past and present. And this is the agenda today. I will explain a little bit about migrant domestic workers that might not be that you might not familiar with, and also some related policies because their scope of work related to older adults. And also I will share a bit about the methods that I use and the results, preliminary results, and some other projects that might be interesting for you. So to introduce you about domestic workers, so if you can see on the top right, there are some terms that you may familiar. So sometimes people say maid or helper, but those terms are not really appropriate to address to domestic workers because maid has a history of like a slavery, and helper is not really representing their work as a domestic worker. So the appropriate term is domestic workers. So domestic workers is a part of the international labors, and mainly or majority being women, because some countries, I will explain later, only allow female to be a domestic worker, especially migrant domestic worker. And C198 is the policy or the law that can protect domestic workers, but unfortunately only 35 countries have ratified this convention. So yeah, they are kind of moderate slavery, if you want to say that. Okay, so that's a basic policy. And the numbers, this is from Macau, mostly domestic workers from Southeast Asian countries, including Indonesia and the Philippines. The numbers were a bit lower during the COVID-19 because it's hard to mobile, and the country or the territory, because Macau is territory, they closed their border. So the domestic workers, the migrant workers, they are stranded in another country while transiting, or they couldn't enter the host country. So the yellow one, the highlighted yellow was numbers in February 2021, and the outside bracket is the previous year. So you can see like a declining number. Macau is a small territory compared with Hong Kong, for example. It's more than 200 domestic workers there, mostly from the Philippines and Indonesia, and also in Taiwan. Same number. I mean, there's a lot of domestic workers in Taiwan from Indonesia and the Philippines. But because the government bilateral relationship, so more Indonesian domestic workers there than the Philippines. So this is just the statistic roughly. And in Malaysia, as I mentioned, that some countries only allow female as a domestic workers, migrant domestic workers, including Malaysia. It explicitly say that only female can apply, and also in Hong Kong, for example. And they only accept, in Malaysia, only accept domestic workers from these countries. And some countries also, they mention that domestic workers are allowed to care for older adults, baby. While I'm in Macau, I talk with them. They also take care for the pet of the family. So the whole family, including the pet, they have to care for. And however, we need to remember that domestic workers are basically, or the basic tasks are cooking and cleaning. But yeah, in some countries, they need to take care for the family members as well. And this is like the cost for hiring domestic workers. But before 2022, the cost was not regulated. So it could be very high, depends the middle person how to handle it. And also there is kind of probation, 3 months, did not perform or fail to do duties as required. However, it doesn't really specifically mention what kind of duties or what is the key performance. We are familiar with that term. So it's very depend on the employer. If they are happy with the domestic worker, they will continue to hire, but if not, they will just fire them. So it's some kind of a social injustice there. And then also in Malaysia, the website of the government mentions that should be given nutritious food and proper rest. However, it doesn't specifically regulate that domestic worker they can sleep in their own room. So because of that, many, I don't know how many, but it happens in the reality that they share the room with the older adults or the children or the baby, because it's not required to give their own bedroom. Also in Hong Kong, Singapore, even in Hong Kong, is worse there because they have to sleep in the kitchen during night, so they don't have a place to rest during the day because it's used as a kitchen. And like in Singapore, domestic workers in Malaysia, they are not allowed to marry during their work as domestic workers. They could go back to their home country, like Indonesia, and get married, but not in Malaysia. Okay, so that's about the policies that could not justice for this professional to this professional. So this is a typical weekend in Macau when I was in Macau. As I mentioned, cleaning, cooking, but now also caring for older adults. Even though it's their day off, not every country require or specifically mention day off. For example, in Malaysia, I met some domestic workers, they only have, in Taiwan as well, they only have 1 day off in 1 month. So it's very different situation in each country, in each household. So even though it's their day off, for example, in this picture, they still have to bring the older adult that they care for, because the family, they want to go somewhere that it's hard for them to bring the older adult. So they just ask, could you please bring Ama or the grandma with you? I will give you some extra money, for example, to buy food or do some activities. But yeah, they still have to bring or carrying the older adults during their day off. And what I observed when I was in Macau, that sparked my interest to learn about the domestic workers experience and also gerontology, because this is new field for me. These older adults, they seem like happy to mingle out or gather with the domestic workers friends, even though it's different cultures. They try different food that usually they have in the home. So yeah, it's kind of interesting interaction. It's not only like as a job to care someone, but I could see like a connection between genuine relationship between the domestic workers and the older adults that they are caring for. And because of that, my proposal was like domestic workers could be like categorized as informal caregivers, although we don't want to like give more burden or more exploiting them as a informal caregiver, because it's not their task to care for older adults. The basic tasks are cooking and cleaning. So this piece commentary I wrote together with the domestic workers themselves or the representative of domestic workers. And the method that I use for the fellowship is MISS method. So last year we did the quantitative part by doing online surveys, and some parts also being printed out, some survey printed out, because not all domestic workers are allowed to have mobile phone or not allowed to use the internet. They might have a mobile phone, but very limited access during the day. So we work together with the migrant workers union, domestic migrant workers union, for example, in Malaysia, to reach out the members of this organization or the association. And this year, we are doing the qualitative part by interviewing them, and then we will present in the visual form later in 2023 this year. Okay, so we use several instruments last year, and for the migrant domestic workers, we asked from the socio-demographic status until the dementia attitude scale. Prof. Bianca mentioned that she worked with PhD student already, I think already graduated. We also measure the dementia knowledge and also the dementia attitudes that we could like maybe collaborate after this to compare between countries. And also we ask them, the domestic workers, about the older adults' condition from the socio-demographic status, health status and lifestyle, and some psychological conditions as well, as you can see here. So what I would like to share is the preliminary result of this, only the description, statistic description, not really have looked through deeper. So this is, for example, so this is the poster, the leaflet that we use to recruit participants, and the inclusion criteria, they must be at least 18 years, 18 years old, and then working as domestic worker in 5 countries: Malaysia, Singapore, Macau, Hong Kong, and Taiwan, because those countries are the most countries that Indonesian domestic workers come to, and then they have to take care of older adult. The older adult must be at least 60 years old, and then caring for these older adults at least 1 year. And if they only care for these older adults without doing cooking and cleaning, we exclude them, because that's a different situation, different condition. And then if they are undocumented, or maybe if you're familiar with illegal terms, illegal workers, but we use undocumented terms for this purpose. And if they stay in that country or territory using other visa rather than the working visa, we also exclude. Because, for example, in Macau, migrant workers, including me at that time as a migrant workers, we have to pay double for the health services. So if the person use or they have like a permanent residence permit or other than working visa, they pay as same as the citizen. So it's a different situation as well, challenge that we face as a migrant workers. Okay. So this is the descriptive results about the domestic workers themselves. Mostly we got participants from Hong Kong and Malaysia because many Indonesian domestic workers are there, and a bit in Macau and Taiwan. And in terms of insurance or social protection, it's kind of good numbers that at least 70-ish% they are covered, either basic or the holistic insurance, but about 20-ish% they are not covered, or it's a reimbursement system, means if they need to go to doctor, for example, they will go to doctor and then asking reimbursement from the employer, but it's not guaranteed that they will be reimbursed. It depends on the employer's mercy. And then how many older adults they are cared for? Mostly only 1%, but also some caring for more than one. And also some or 23% of them caring for baby. And in terms of the income or salary, in average, they only got like a $300 per month in average. But if you see the total average or the average working hour per day, they have to work 14 hours per day in average. And among or during these 14 hours, in average, they need to take care, or the caring task is about the half. So almost 1/3 of the day they are caring for the older adults, and the rest they are doing cooking, cleaning, domestic works tasks. And the age is 37, in average, because in some country like in Malaysia, once they reach certain age, they cannot continue as domestic workers. So there are some scenarios. For example, they could go back to Indonesia, or they could go to another country with no limitation for the age. So Macau, for example, is the fourth or the third or fourth country that usually they go to after they work in Singapore, Malaysia, or Hong Kong, and then they go to Macau as the last country because less rigid regulation or policy. So that's the basic information. And because my background is psychology, I'm interested in their mental health. This is the two variables that I'm looking for, mainly the depressive symptoms using PHQ-9, and then the anxiety symptoms using GAD-7. So this data was collected after kind of like an endemic period, because we also did like a survey during the COVID-19 was still high. So 2020-ish, the score was higher. So this one is after the pandemic. Only 70% show moderate depressive symptoms, but during the COVID-19, it's about like 25 showing moderate and moderately severe. And then same with the anxiety, non or minimal anxiety symptoms during this period last year, but during the COVID-19, the scores were worse because they show moderate and severe anxiety symptoms at that time. And the caregiving impact, it's a bit lower than the average. theoretical average, so 30, and then loneliness, ULS 6, it's also in the middle. The social support, the perceived social support, kind of in the middle as well. And the acculturation, it's good if you see the marginalization means the people who has marginalization score high means they feel being alienated or they do not belong to both cultures from in Indonesian cultures and the hosting country cultures. But this one is 2.5, so means not many of them feel being alienated. And the integration is 3.5, so seems good. They feel or they can do integration in the hosting country. And the autonomy or the when they are doing the caregiving, a bit higher than the theoretical average. And for the self-efficacy, seems like they will have efficacy to care for older adults, and the knowledge of their knowledge about dementia is relatively low, only 16 from 0 to 54. And for the attitudes, it's like a bit higher than the average, the theoretical average, 95.8. So after this, I will show a table, so bear with me with the table because it's a lot of numbers there. I will go back to that. So there are, if we are interested to dementia, for example, so 22 is the knowledge, dementia knowledge. It's correlated negatively with the depressive symptoms, but not with the anxiety symptoms. And number 3, working years in the country negatively correlated with the knowledge, means more years they spend in that country, less knowledge that they have. That's interesting. Maybe because they don't have like enough time to update their knowledge about the dementia, or they just don't have resources. And then some other variables that related with the knowledge. Regarding the attitudes, also it's negative with the anxiety, the depressive symptoms. And number 5, working hour per day. So more hours they spend for working as domestic workers, the attitude also become lower, probably because they become tired and then lose their patience to care for the older adults with dementia symptoms, for example. And the 88, it's a number 21. There's some variables that are correlated with that. Because my main interests are migrant domestic workers' mental health. So the depressive symptom is positively correlated with the dementia symptoms or screening using 88 of the older adults. So that's kind of showing if the older adults having these symptoms of dementia, it could also worsening the migrant workers' conditions or mental health. So I will skip this now. For now, I'm happy to share the PowerPoint later, so you can see further about the correlationship. I will go back to some previous slide. So this is what they are doing when they care for older adults. Most of the time in preparing elderly meals, maybe not exclusively for the older adults, but for the whole family. And many things they do for the older adults. If we remember that they spend almost 8 hours to care for the older adults. And for the older adults condition themselves, this is some tables show or show the conditions of them. In average, they are 80 years old, and then from the observation of domestic workers, the dementia symptoms are there, like 4.7 with the cutoff. That what I know. This is new field for me. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. So the cutoff that I know is more than 2 to show like there's kind of dementia symptoms. So from their observation, the older adult that they care for, showing like in average 4.7. And the daily life activity also, these older adults quite dependent because it's only 5.2 because the cutoff is less than 9. Because less than 9 means the older adults depend to the caregiver. And the problematic behavior scales in the middle, I think 27. And this is some health status condition. 60% of them showing arthritis from the observation of domestic workers. And this one also demographic variables, mostly have child or children, and then not smoking or never smoked. So yeah, that's good. Okay, so the difference between categories, for example, in country, there are differences in anxiety symptoms, but I haven't done the post hoc analysis, so don't know yet which country that has lower or higher anxiety symptoms, but there are differences between this country. And for the insurance as well, there are differences between for the anxiety and depressive symptoms between these categories. And also this one, people who care for more than one older adult seems show higher depressive symptoms than domestic workers who are caring for only one person, but not for the anxiety symptoms. And in terms of caring for baby, if they also caring for babies, most likely they also show higher symptoms of depressive and anxiety symptoms compare fellows who are not caring for baby. But in terms of income, there's no differences for the depressive symptoms, but yes, for the anxiety symptoms. And regarding the health status of the domestic workers, the domestic health status of the older adults, domestic workers who are caring for older adults with arthritis, diabetes, heart disease, stroke, hypertension, or yeah, basically all those conditions, show higher depressive symptoms, PHQ-9, but not always for the anxiety symptoms. So if you see, for example, diabetes, domestic workers who are caring for older adults with diabetes show like 8.7, while others without diabetes, the domestic workers' anxiety symptoms in average is 7.1. So there's these conditions. And another health status of the older adults, asthma, and wheelchair. So yeah, we can imagine it's more tasks, more energy to use for carrying older adults with the wheelchair. Okay, so to conclude that the mental health condition, especially the depressive and anxiety symptoms of migrant domestic workers, are associated with the socio-demographic, cultural, and economical factors, as well as the older adults' health condition. And migrant domestic workers with more tasks and working hours, they have like a higher depressive anxiety symptoms compared fellows with fewer tasks and working hours. And we also have seen that social security like insurance and the cultural factors like language mastery and also the integration to the society, it's also related or associated with the mental health condition. So these things could ease their mental health conditions. And because as a domestic workers, their primary task is cooking and cleaning. if the older adults in the family members showing dementia symptoms or other conditions that require full attention or more assistance, the family should hire other persons or like caregivers, professional, semi-professional caregivers, rather than put everything under domestic workers' tasks, because it's not their task to care for older adults. To prepare meals or cooking and cleaning, the laundry, that is still scope of the domestic work. But if the older adults need more assistance, then the family should hire other persons to caring for the older adults, especially if show the dementia symptoms, as we see in the table. And the next step is analyzing the quantitative data, but also we are now collecting the qualitative data. And what we learned from this project is working with the workers union, domestic workers unions is very important to reach out the participant, because it's like behind the scene or hidden participants. Their working setting is different with people working in the university, people working in the hospital, for example, hotel. Like also because a lot of Indonesian migrant workers working in Macau, like for example in hotel, as a construction site, they are visible, but domestic workers kind of invisible, because their working environment is someone's house that we cannot easily enter. So it's important to work with the community representative to reach out the participants. Yeah, so that's about the study. And some projects that I'm also working on is we try to develop or write something about trans-affirming elderly care services in Indonesia and Malaysia. So we try to bersilaturahim is a Malay word to connect, to make a bond between two parties. So we try to connect transgender communities in Indonesia and in Malaysia. So last week we have a talk, life experience sharing. I will show you after this. And another one is a thermophile, is a mental health of queer asylum seekers and refugees. We do a scoping review and Delphi method to provide kind of a policy brief or suggestion how to provide services that could improve the life or mental health of the queer asylum seekers in Australia and refugees. And if you're interested with one of our project about the trans-affirming elderly care services, this is the recording of the event and some materials that were shared by the community members themselves. We have Bu Ruli, Miss Ruli from Yogyakarta, Indonesia. She is working in providing care services for the older transgender people there. And Nisha Ayub, she is the co-director or the co-founder of SID Foundations, the only, sorry, I will see my chat. Oh, okay, there's some question. Okay, later. So Nisha is from the SID Foundation, the only organization in Malaysia that provides care services for the older adults or transgender and also the older adults. And Eman, she was talking about indigenous transgender people in Sulawesi, one of the South Sulawesi, one of the provinces in Indonesia. So yeah, I will share these slides to you later so you can access the materials later. And that's all from me, I think. Yep. Thank you so much for your attention and looking forward for the discussion. Back to you, Prof. Bianca.
Thank you very much, Andrian. That was a really good talk. And we now have an opportunity for some Q&A. Jo has put her camera on. So Jo will give you the first question. And then after that, I'll go to the chat and then come back again to people on the screen.
I didn't actually have a question. I just clapped, but I think it was really fascinating work that you've done, and it really highlights some of the disparity between what's considered a professional carer and a domestic worker, because poor people, they seem to be working really hard.
Yeah, thank you, Joe, for the comment. What I forgot to mention is, I know it's uncommon in Australia to hire someone from overseas to stay with you, with your family in your house, just to care or doing the domestic works and caring your family members. But yeah, it's common in Asian countries because in Hong Kong, for example, the regulation says the domestic workers must stay together or live in with the family members. But different in Macau, they can choose to live in or live out. In Malaysia, it's compulsory for domestic workers to live in. So yeah, it's a different situation. I know maybe some people can't imagine that how come these people to work for 14 hours, for example. But yeah.
Actually, I have one question now that I got the floor. You also mentioned that there was a fee involved in actually getting a domestic worker onboarded, I suppose, of 5,000 Australian dollars. Does that ever occur where that's a family that has to pay that? But is it sometimes the case that the domestic worker is promised a position if they also contribute towards those $5,000? Because
Okay, I think you talk about this slide, right? So so it's just recently regulated last year. The cost to hire domestic workers is about 5,000 US dollar. Yeah, so it's paid by the employer to kind of official agency to hire these domestic workers. Sorry, what is your question?
So my question was whether it in some instances actually becomes a requirement, if people are wanting to come and work as a domestic worker, whether they say, okay, well, you're going to get $500 a month, but we'll take $100 of that a month to sort of put your contribution towards that.
Okay.
Because if the minimum annual income
True.
is 7,000, is it ringgit? Then that's pretty much 2 years of full income. That's the cost of hiring someone.
Yeah. Before this year, and I think still happen. So the problem is the middle person. They could take like additional cost to the migrant domestic workers, and then these domestic workers, they have no choice rather than okay, agree, and then they have to pay their salary, part of their salary, to this middle person. Like previously, they like pay like 9 months after they get job and from their salary to this middle person. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, we've got lots of hands and questions coming through, so we'll just go to the chat quickly and then to you, Tuan. So we've got a comment and a question in the chat from Adriana, who says, as you mentioned, most of the domestic workers are not professional caregivers, but they are expected to perform tasks typically undertaken by community nurses and patient carers. If there is a training program to upskill the domestic worker as a professional carer, in turn, can they charge higher salary? And do you think there would be a market demand from the families in Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Macau?
Yeah, thank you, Adriana, for the question. Each country has their own terms and policy regarding domestic workers, and also some countries, they have this caregivers job, but family members or household, they prefer to hire domestic workers because they could pay less if compared to hire caregivers, for example, in Hong Kong. So that's why they hire these domestic workers and give these tasks to care for older adults. But speaking or answering the question if there's training, yes, like in Singapore, for example, some NGOs, they provide domestic workers training to, in Malaysia as well. I think this started to care for older adults. However, the point is we don't want to exploit the domestic workers to care for older adults with health conditions, because it's different scope of job. As domestic workers, they should doing cooking and cleaning, with a bit of caring for older adults. It's fine. Healthy older adults is fine. But if the older adults have these conditions, the family should hire other person to care for these particular older adults. But answering your questions, yes, there's some NGOs provide training, so the domestic workers could like have this knowledge, but it's another challenge for them to talk with the employer that oh, I have these skills, so you should hire give me more salary, for example. It's like a power imbalance there. It's not as easy as they asking for the more salary.
Great, thank you.
Is that answering your question, Adrian? Okay.
I think there
Yes,
are.
thank you.
Oh, good. Thank you, Adriana. Tuan, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Bianca. Thank you, Adrian, for fantastic presentations and on very important topics. And I totally agree with you that this is a very important topic, especially for low and middle income countries where the long-term care system is not yet developed and mainly relies on informal carers. And just want to relate to the question. I want to make a comment on the questions from Adriana. For example, in Vietnam, if the domestic workers they be trained in by the agent, they will be charged. They will charge more compared to the domestics who do not receive any training in providing care for older people. So, and there is a big market there in Vietnam. I don't know about other countries, but in Vietnam, there is increasing demand for the more skillful domestic worker who can do the household work, but also like providing care for the family members. I have a question regarding the recruitments in Indonesian communities. You said that you found a way to recruit because of the domestic worker, they work in the host family, right? And how you can reach out to them. Of course, you said that via the association committees and things like that. Can you elaborate more on that approach?
Yeah, thank you, Tuan, for the question. For the first comment, yes, it's also happened in Indonesia itself, because in Vietnam, I believe it's a local migration rate. Usually, people from village or more rural area, they comes to the big city, Hanoi, or to the big city to work as domestic workers. That also happened in Indonesia. Answering your questions about how to reach out the participants, because for example, in Malaysia, we collaborate with Indonesian migrant domestic workers in Malaysia. They have like a weekly meeting, or there's sometimes workshop or events that many members are coming. Not only members, potential members as well, because it's open to any Indonesian domestic workers. So I came to their event and then explained, we are doing this. Would you like to be our participants? And also we use the electronic leaflet, and then they distribute to the members through their Facebook is the most used social media among domestic workers. So they just distribute online or WhatsApp group. So yeah, in person, and also using the social media to promote this study. And then they can fill out the online survey. But also we prepared the printed one, because they can fill out on the site during the events.
So just want to follow up. Do you speak in English to them, or you speak Bahasa, or you need like the Indonesian research assistant to do all the advertisement work for you?
Okay, just I will Good. I share my screen again. So this is the poster, for example. We use Bahasa Indonesia, and I'm speaking Bahasa Indonesia because I'm Indonesian. Yeah, so we talk in Bahasa Indonesia.
Right, thank you.
Okay, many people have put their cameras on. I'm not sure if you all want to ask questions or not. If you do, could you either put your virtual or real hand up, and then I'll come to you? Upasna, great.
We cannot hear
Upasna,
you.
We can't hear you, Upasna. You might have to adjust your sound settings. Okay, and Upasna, maybe we'll come back to you while you're adjusting that. And in the meantime, I'll just go to Ha.
Yeah. Thanks, Adrian. I think that is excellent work and excellent presentation. Thank you very much. I think that your findings are very interesting, and it's very important to include domestic workers in any intervention for informal care of people with dementia, for example, and broadly for the elderly people. However, I guess the challenge might be the literacy for the domestic worker. That is very important. I don't know about other countries, but for example, in Vietnam, many domestic workers, they just like original farmer, and they even haven't graduated their primary degree yet. And some of them might not know how to read and how to write properly. And they just come to the big city just for money. And they do the housework and look after the people, old people as well. So for them, for those people, literacy is a big issue. If we want to deliver any intervention to them, not just about the general literacy, but also health literacy and digital literacy. And for example, if they don't have mobile phones, so how can we deliver digital intervention to them? They don't have access to electronic devices. So that is another question. And also another barriers might be their available resource. Like I said, they don't have electronic device, so how can we deliver? They don't have dedicated time for upskill, and whether they want to upskill or not, that is another question. Because for family carer, they have a motivation to upskill, to look after their loved one. But for domestic work, they just work for money. So what is the point for them to spend hours to study something or to listen to someone educate about dementia and how to look after a person with dementia? So that is another question. So I think that there's a lot of things that we can further explore. You may may want to have a further study to explore some of the barrier and how we can tackle of those issues with the domestic worker. And same as Tuấn, I'm very keen on knowing how we can recruit participants in your study. Because I originally come from Vietnam, so I know that in Vietnam many domestic workers, they just have the job based on the word of mouth or personal referral, and they don't go through any organization, any agent at all. So how can you know those people and approach them? And I think their proportion is huge. If I don't say 60% of domestic workers are that people, and only small amount goes through the official agent or organization. So maybe we just see the tip of the iceberg, but not the whole story. So it's just my personal comment. I'm not sure it is true, but just a comment for you, Adrian. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ha. Is that correct, Ha? Yeah, Dr. Ha. There are several points that you raised, and so for literacy, yes, correct. Also, same with Indonesian migrant domestic workers. At least they graduated from high school because it's a compulsory to finish 12 years education in Indonesia. But yeah, some of them have a limited literacy, digital literacy, health literacy. What we are doing in this qualitative part is asking what do they need, or how could we help them in caring for older adults. However, you have raised the important issue that my supervisors also always remind me that we don't want to exploit them more because if if they don't want to upgrade their knowledge, it's fine because they are not caregivers. But what I want to highlight or this project is, if they know something about dementia symptoms, they could use this knowledge to their family members back in Indonesia, because during their day off or during their communication with family members, if they see like, oh, there's something change with mom or father, could you check father or mother to when they speak with their siblings, for example, so because they have this knowledge of dementia. But we don't want to turn them from domestic workers to domestic workers plus caregivers. But hopefully by knowing this dementia knowledge, for example, symptoms, when they recognize, oh, these older adults that I'm caring for showing these symptoms, it's supposed to be care by health professional, caregiver, for example. They could say, it's not easy, I know, but they could say to the employer, hey, the grandma is showing depressive symptoms, and as domestic workers, this is not my job to caring for older adults with dementia symptoms, for example. So that's the the ultimate goal, to empower them as domestic workers, not to change them as domestic workers to caregivers. Yeah, because if they don't want to do that task, then they should not be forced to do the caring tasks. Yeah, if they want to upgrade their knowledge or not. And the Vietnamese domestic workers, I think, has a different environment or challenge as a local domestic workers, because Indonesia as well, many local domestic workers from rural or village area, they come to the big cities and working as domestic workers. But migrant domestic workers, not, I don't know how many percentage, but they are united usually in either like, oh, from this province, they have like this union or association from, for example, Balinese domestic workers, for example, working in Taiwan, working in Macau. So they either from the local area, or, for example, their hobbies, dancing domestic workers. So they have like organizations or associations as a social support for themselves that might not be found in local domestic workers like in Indonesia or Vietnam. So that's how we reach out these participants. But again, yeah, I agree that not all migrant domestic workers join these associations or unions. So yeah, it's the limitation of this study. We cannot like generalize to all migrant domestic workers, Indonesian migrant domestic workers.
Okay, we are fast running out of time. So Basna, if you still have a question to ask, very quickly, and then Andrian very quickly as well. No, we still can't hear you, Basna. I don't know what's going on. All right, never mind. You'll type a response in. Okay. Did anybody else want to ask a quick question?
There's in the chat box, important and just offer
Yeah.
wonderful
There's a
domestic.
very, yes, there's a lovely story in the chat from Laisha Lee, who says this is an important and interesting scope of work and project. Our family in Singapore had a wonderful domestic worker who cared for my grandmother through advanced dementia for almost a decade, till she passed with a bit of formal training, but most of her skills were learned on the job. And she shares this experience going forward, and it has been a huge value add for employers. But we totally acknowledge how challenging this was for her at times. For the most part, she was willing to take on this because she has such a good relationship with my grandmother. So another really interesting aspect you briefly mentioned is that relationship formed between the domestic worker and the older adult, and oftentimes there's such a strong bond. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thank you for bringing up that story, because yeah, that sometimes that we or employer forget that it's not only caring for older adults, but these domestic workers also human, have this kind of emotion. They could to develop connection with the older adults. And when for example, the older adults pass away, the domestic workers also feel sad, but the employers or the children of these older adults, they just thinking, oh, it's just domestic workers. They are not part of the family, so yeah, the employer, they don't really care about the feelings of the domestic workers. But yeah, thank you, Lisa, for bringing up this story.
Okay, I can see this is obviously a topic that sparked a lot of interest, but unfortunately, in the interest of time, I have to close the discussion. Will you please all join me in thanking Andrian for his presentation with your virtual clap reactions? I know it's a poor substitute for a real clap, but nevertheless, we're very grateful to have you present to us.
Thank you so much.
Now, next month, we've got Associate Professor Catherine Ellis presenting on the EXCEL study, a physical activity intervention for individuals with cognitive concerns and mental health symptoms. And that's on Tuesday, the 10th of October at 12 p.m. So thank you very much for addressing, for coming along today and for attending, and we'll see you next time. And I can see lots of praise coming in for Andrian through the chat as well. So all the best, everybody, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye for now.
Thank you.